few movies that I disliked. In fact, the lowest one was a D movie, not an F or D minus movie. And 2018 was kind of like this year. I mean, the year was kind of worse in terms of movies, but not that much. In fact, the bottom two movies on this list, or basically number 10 and number 9, instead of number 2 or number 1 to be specific, are actually just C-grade movies. So honestly, and to be honest, I think that it's gonna be kind of the same when I make my book videos in just a few days. But anyway, without further ado, I guess we better get started. Oh, but there is actually some further ado. Some of these movies have fans with them, and if you end up liking any of these movies, or if you think that my opinion is wrong, then that's perfectly fine. I never say that someone's opinion is superior or inferior as long as you see the movie and make your own judgment. If you like any of these movies, then keep that opinion and tell everyone why you liked it. So without further ado, let's get going. So coming in at number 10 was a movie that I just kind of saw on impulse kind of for this list, and that was Teen Titans Go to the Movies. But to be honest, I kind of also saw it just because it was apparently getting very acclaimed, and I was very surprised by it because even though I haven't seen a Teen Titans Go episode, I know quite a lot about it. I know that the reason it's universally hated is basically because it doesn't really take into account the cliffhanger of the previous cartoon and replaces the heart and excitement with basically very screechy voices and obnoxious characters and even toxic messages for kids. And I will say that there are some of those same problems in this movie, but not by as much. It's the sort of movie that has flaws, but asks you to say, you know what, we made these flaws to have fun, make a joke, kind of like Deadpool for kids. So just come on and enjoy the ride. So I enjoyed it a lot more than I expected to. Some of the songs were actually very catchy and toe-tapping, the last one especially, but the superhero movie one, not in the slightest. That was a horrible song, and kind of like that song in particular, the whole movie was also kind of conceited toward, and kind of pretentious towards Scott Menville's character, Robin. It was kind of just a big Valentine's Day gift for that main character, and not as much for the other Titans. The Titans actually, when you think about it, end up committing murder, and also act immature just because they feel like it, or basically just to move the story forward. But I didn't hate it, and it ended up just being number 10. Now taking the number 9 spot, we have Slender Man, a way overly conventional horror movie. I'll give credit where credit is due. Some of the sets and some of the horror sequences, such as this one that takes place in the library and another that takes place at a hospital, are decently made. However, I feel like the filmmakers only wanted to do this just so they could have bragging rights to say they made a horror movie about the Slender Man and they didn't think about what direction they should actually go with it. None of the characters really end up doing anything progressive to be satisfactory in the plot, and as a result, it just ends up being a complete throwaway horror movie, with some good design, but that's all it has going for it. And taking the number 8 spot, we have Life of the Party. Now, I really adore Melissa McCarthy. I think she's hilarious, great timing, maybe better of an actor than I could ever dream to be. This is a movie where I would kind of prefer admiring it rather than watching it. You see, I think the message it sends is important, that you're never too late to go back to school and try to rebuild a life for yourself. And so that was very nice, and I also liked how it showed that adults can have young friends and vice versa. However, it's just the comedy aspect that fell apart for me, as well as the fact that most of the characters were just either stereotypical or just downright plain, and other times where there were some incredibly awkward moments, and the blow was that I didn't end up laughing once. Maybe I just wasn't in the mood. But I just feel like they could have done so much more with this idea. At least Melissa McCarthy's character is very sweet and understanding and compassionate. And taking the number 7 spot, we have The Darkest Minds. I really didn't want this to be on my worst list, and I didn't think it would be. I read the book in preparation for watching this movie, and unlike movies such as The Fifth Wave or the Maze Runner movies, this seems to be just a carbon copy of the book. They didn't really seem to do anything imaginative with it, other than making special effects that in comparison to other YA movies look kind of phoned in, as well as this very dumb decision to give a huge spoiler to who is actually the hidden bad guy way early on before the final climax. At first I kind of wanted to see movie adaptations of Never Fade and In the Afterlight, but after this movie ended, I didn't really feel anything big. I just wanted to move on to the next YA adaptation, such as The Hate U Give. Now taking the number 6 spot is Sherlock Gnomes. Now, just like The Darkest Minds, I didn't want this to be on my list, because it really has beautiful animation and it's a sequel to a movie that I really like. However, I just feel like Romeo and Juliet was a good enough movie on its own, and this should have been a fun adventure around San Francisco, and it is an adventure around San Francisco technically, but it tries to phone in this lesson about being reliable towards your partner and companionship. It just felt like they just had to make a lesson. It felt completely forced and unnecessary in this sort of environment, and that made it just another typical rescue mission with, yes, a phoned-in moral. American Hustle, X-Men Apocalypse, Passengers, Mother, and now Red Sparrow. Here are a few things in common with all of those movies. Jennifer Lawrence is the best thing about them, and 2, they're very overlong, and 3, they've earned D grades from me. I like Jennifer Lawrence, I really do. Just like Melissa McCarthy, she's a terrific actress and just a great human being in general. I just don't like the movies she decides to star in. Yes, the movie is occasionally lovely to look at, and there is some hard-hitting violence here, but there are way too many stretches of character interactions that we don't care at all about. Characters that we just don't care enough to know their names properly, apart from Jennifer Lawrence and Joel Edgerton's characters. And it's just another conventional, like, bomb's about to go off, we have to stop it fast, that sort of thing. There's no heart, no good humor. All that it really has going for it is sexploitation and violence, and I really didn't like that really at all. I couldn't wait for this movie to end. I really hope that the next movie I see starring Jennifer Lawrence is good, but somehow I just doubt it at this point. Now taking the number 4 spot is a movie that, like Teen Titans Go to the Movies and Slender Man, I just saw on impulse for this list, and that was 50 Shades Freed. You want to know this one particular sex scene? Well, Anna and Christian are up late and Anna was eating ice cream. And then Anna takes the spoon with the ice cream and starts dabbing it all over Christian's body, and then she licks it off. And then they do it vice versa. But on their bodies, the ice cream doesn't look like ice cream. It looks like one of them popped a very bad zit and they're licking the leaking pus off of their bodies. Like, ugh, that's the kind of the idea about how unsexy this and uninteresting this movie is. They just never learned. I don't quite remember exactly what I said when I put 50 Shades Darker as my number 1 worst of 2017, but I'm pretty sure I said something like this. If they had divided the amount of sex scenes by about 3, made not every interesting thing just end up being foreplay that we don't care about, and maybe made the characters just, I don't know, a tad more likable, or maybe a lot more likable, then this would have had a fighting chance for at least a C+ maybe. But I mean, did we really have to have an okay car chase with horrible background music and then just more kissing and making out right after avoiding a stalker? Did we really have to have that? I'll give credit where it's due. Dakota Johnson really does try her best, and at least there's a climax without anyone getting naked. And it's a good thing that this is the last one, not just because we won't have to sit through another one, but because the fact that it's the end allows them to make some decisions that are minorly decent, but the plot is just really not smart at all. At this point, their sex scenes don't mean anything, but overall I couldn't believe that the filmmakers just weren't able to take all the hints that everyone was throwing its way. If the 50 Shades trilogy can get completed, then every single planned movie trilogy and every single planned movie series should be finished. Aragon, The Last Airbender, The Ninja Turtles, every single one of them. And by the way, I like those movies, but not a lot of other people seem to. But anyway, moving on. Thank goodness I won't have to talk about a 50 Shades movie in any of my worst movies anymore. 2015 was the original, 2017 was darker, 2018 was this one, and 2016 was the 50 Shades of Black. Ugh. Now, I hope this isn't cheating, but number 3 was a movie that technically came out in December of 2017, but I just felt like it was just so bad and so unremarkable, so disappointing, and I felt like, for the most part, most of the world ended up seeing it when 2018 came to play. So just for this one instance, I'm making an exception to the, yeah, it has to be this year rule. And that is Downsizing by Alexander Payne. The idea of not only humans shrinking, but also the politics that end up coming with less and less people around to do conspicuous consumption in order to protect the environment. I really like that idea, and I like that there are some debates about the problems with this, and the benefits from this as well, the ones that clash. It felt like these were conversations that would happen in real life. So why is it worse than 50 Shades Freed of all of the things? Well, by the halfway point, there really wasn't much it had going for it being put in Matt Damon's character, Paul. But also, there were too many instances where it seemed like the writers just forgot that they made a movie about being small. There were very few moments that couldn't have been made in any different sort of setting. This ended up just being a typical coming-of-age drama that I might have fallen asleep from, and very few movies actually make me fall asleep, but the ones that do, or the ones that really make me want it to end, like say Red Sparrow, those are the real stinkers, and Downsizing ended up going into there. And now we're down to the bottom 2. Number 2 is the one that came out in January, Den of Thieves. I was really looking forward to this because The Italian Job from 2003 is still my favorite movie of all time, and I really like Gerard Butler in the Olympus Has Fallen movies. London Has Fallen a little less so, but still okay. But here he's completely insufferable. He feels like the antagonist, his character Nicholas O'Brien. He's just a complete junkie and a conceited cop and doesn't really do anything proper for his teammates. I don't even remember what his teammates even looked like. The thieves just wanted to rob this bank because it's never been robbed before. However, it's like they don't even try to have a regular life. It's like they don't even try to put in a job application or anything. They just want it for the greater good, but it just felt like a waste of life. But even so, I was kind of rooting for them. Like, I didn't want Gerard Butler to end up being the victor. And if they get away with it, I'm not going to spoil it, it's just, I gave this movie a D-. If you ask me, the heist itself was okay, but the final execution was very horrid. The getaway was just completely lazy. It tried to be like one of those movies like Point Break or Heat, but missed the mark entirely by just having completely uninteresting and unsympathetic characters. But there is one movie that outplayed all of these in my worst of the year by a mile. I wish I could say it was Mile 22 starring Mark Wahlberg, but I didn't see that movie. That would have been a great pun. But this is number 1. And I hope this isn't cheating either, because it did come out in December. However, it was also released wide in January, and so I guess that sort of counts. In fact, this is so out of my comfort zone of movies. The only reason I saw this is because an actress I really like tweeted that this was her favorite movie of all time now, and another critic that I really admire, she put this on her number 1 worst of 2017. And that is none other than Paul Thomas Anderson's Phantom Thread. Ugh. Let me put it this way. At the start, Daniel Day-Lewis's character Reynolds and Vicky Krieps' character Alma, they meet at a restaurant where Alma is the waitress, and Reynolds orders a ton of food, while at the same time looking at her chest. And then they start a relationship when he takes her home. I mean, could how they met be any more lifeless? And speaking of life in general, just like the 50 Shades movies, except this is not even a so bad it's fun to laugh at and it's so fun to trash. This is not one of those movies. You just want to turn the TV off because it's just a bunch of walking across the runway with people that feel uncomfortable in all these clothes, and the main character being someone who doesn't enjoy what he's doing and doesn't know what he wants in life, but just drags everyone down with him. you just want to smack some sense into him right then, right now, even more than Christian Grey. A lot of big critics have praised this for its immaculate setting, but to be honest, watching Phantom Thread, a 2-hour movie that feels like a 4-hour movie, is like being locked in an empty 1950s ballroom for an entire day. I mean, it's fun to look at, but by about half an hour you realize there are no books to read, no people to interact with, or any people that we care about anyway, in this case of the movie, and we just feel like we need a bathroom break, or we want to go to do something else, but we can't. This movie had nothing going for it. In fact, when Alma ends up poisoning Reynolds in the halfway point, I was so bored and turned off that I didn't actually know that she did that. It just went through one eye and out the other with me. There's a deleted scene where Reynolds Woodcock, which is a hilarious name but no one seems to acknowledge, and his sister are having breakfast. And he ends up starting a food fight, and in the middle of it he ends up pouring tea down her back. Now, I generally love watching food fights. They're just, they can't usually happen in real life. However, for this one, when he ends up pouring tea down her back, I thought, that burnt her. I mean, you shouldn't have done that. Like, that's how out of tune with this movie I was. Phantom Thread is simply 120 minutes of a toxic relationship with Daniel Day-Lewis in his apparent final film role as someone who is about as interesting as an empty 4-day-old popcorn bag with some mud print on it. And so there you have it. Now I no longer have to talk about these movies ever again, and that's a real breath of fresh air for me. And I'm also very excited to talk about my best books of the year and worst books of the year too, so I guess there's that. But as always, thanks again for watching with me. Hope you have a great year in 2019. Hope that we all have a good year in 2019. And if you would like to look at my best movies of the year list, just check the link below. And I guess I'll see you around. Bye!